Oh no, Solo. Solo is tanking at the box office this weekend. This is Neon for CLOWNFISH TV. We're going to talk about Solo, a Star Wars story, and how it's doing at the box office this weekend. The short answer is it's not doing very well. It's opened well below expectations. Now, we have seen Solo for ourselves, and actually we did like the movie. We thought it was pretty good, but there are some factors going on here, not the least of which is probably what seems to be an unofficial fan boycott, just a general lack of interest from the public. Let's go out to the independent.co.uk and look at a story they just put up a couple hours ago. Solo, a Star Wars story, is struggling at the box office. One trade publication calls the movie's international numbers dismal. Solo, a Star Wars story, may have broken Memorial Day box office records, or a record, rather, opening night. Some analysts are calling the highly anticipated movie a disappointment. Despite taking the record for best preview gross on Memorial Day weekend of all time, the $36 million Friday has led to The Hollywood Reporter and Entertainment Weekly to say the movie is struggling at the American box office. The movie now has an estimated weekend total of $114.2 million, according to Deadline. That is the worst opening weekend for any of the Disney-produced Star Wars movies so far. Now, if you're thinking the international box office might save it, that happens with films like Pirates of the Caribbean and Transformers, you're dead wrong, because Star Wars is not very popular in China, especially. At the international box office, things are not looking too good either. After launching in 43 territories, including the UK and China, the movie took just $11.4 million on Friday, with an estimated $10 million weekend total on China. The Hollywood Reporter called those figures dismal. Yeah, China does not like Star Wars movies. They've tried repeatedly to market Star Wars films to China, and it doesn't do very well. They don't do well. The Last Jedi was a horrible bomb in China. They pulled it out of theaters. I think it was under 2 weeks. It was in the theaters. And Solo, a Star Wars story, they actually changed the title of Solo. They called it Ranger Solo, and they tried to market it as a standalone science fiction film in China. You couldn't fool the Chinese. It's still Star Wars. They still don't like it. Reactions to the movie have been mixed here in the States. Again, we saw the movie. I actually thought it was pretty good. For me, it actually felt the most like the original trilogy of any of the new Disney movies. But people aren't really taking to it too well. Rotten Tomatoes critical score right now is 71%, which is very mediocre. And that's actually, I think, the third lowest rated Star Wars movie, I think right under Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace. So that gives you some indication. And the audience score is only at 58%. Now, I'm sort of on the fence about the actual audience score, because a lot of people I've talked to actually did like the movie. Maybe it's because they went in with lowered expectations, like myself and Geeky Sparkles. We actually expected the worst and were pleasantly surprised that the movie was actually pretty decent. And we're wondering if people aren't just downvoting the film on Rotten Tomatoes, again, as part of the boycott, as part of the backlash against The Last Jedi. And this is what was really interesting about Solo, is the boycott doesn't really have a lot to do with this movie. It has more to do with The Last Jedi and a lot of the drama surrounding the fandom since The Last Jedi. And in fact, many fans saying that they were going to boycott the film. I mean, seriously, you probably could have put the best Star Wars film ever out, and people still probably would have boycotted it just because they're so angry about the situation with Star Wars, with Lucasfilm, some of the things said by Kathleen Kennedy, etc., etc. In fact, one person I talked to on Twitter, when I said I actually did like the movie, said, whether the movie was good or bad didn't matter. This was about sending a message to Disney and Lucasfilm. The thing about this, though, is that this might not actually go the way you expect it to go. Geeky Sparkles and I have been talking about this, and knowing how Disney tends to parse its data, what they're probably going to take away from this when they have their meetings next week is, okay, the classic trilogy characters don't work. Creating an old school Star Wars movie doesn't work. What made more money? Oh, The Last Jedi made a lot more money than Solo. So let's make more movies like The Last Jedi instead of trying to make movies that have a lot of fan service like Solo. So it'll be really interesting to see what Disney takes away from this. Now, what will not happen, I would be very, very shocked if it did happen, is what a lot of fans are secretly hoping for, which is the firing of Kathleen Kennedy from Lucasfilm. I do not see that happening. I think that they will kind of reevaluate how they are tackling Star Wars, but I do not see them firing Kathleen Kennedy because she has produced several movies. This is the first sort of misfire, but she has produced several movies that have made over $1 billion at the box office. Disney's not going to let her go. If anything, and this is what I'm personally afraid of, is they're going to double down on films like The Last Jedi instead of films like Solo. Now, if we go out to Forbes and we see, Scott Mendelsohn, who many people have described as a defender, Disney's defender of everything Star Wars. Scott Mendelsohn loved The Last Jedi. He was a very vocal defender of The Last Jedi, and he apparently liked Solo quite a bit too. Now, his story from yesterday was Solo, a Star Wars story, disappoints with a mere 36 million Friday. Yeah, for a Star Wars movie, that's not great. I mean, let's face it, that's not great. Now, the thing is that without boring you with all the details of Mendelsohn's article, he is talking that Solo might actually play out more like a film like Batman Begins, where it opened soft, but then word of mouth got around, and it actually had legs. It performed okay at the box office throughout the duration of its run. People might be soured on Star Wars because of The Last Jedi. They might be turned off to Solo because of them recasting Harrison Ford. They might be completely confused as to why there's another Star Wars movie 6 months after the last one, and they may not turn out in force the first weekend, especially with it being Memorial Day weekend. People might get busy, and then if they have time, check it out next weekend. That's a kind of a best case scenario. I don't really see that happening. I mean, Solo has a lot of competition. It has competition from Deadpool. It still has competition from Infinity War. People are still just getting out to see Infinity War, which is clearly going to be the box office champ of the summer. Solo was just kind of there. And the thing with the way Disney is treating Star Wars, they're trying to make Star Wars the next MCU with a lot of kind of filler stories in between the event movies like the Avengers. I don't think that's going to work. I really don't think that's going to work. And I think Disney, after this weekend especially, is going to take a step back and be like, you know what, guys, maybe we should just stick to releasing trilogies and the occasional movie, but make sure that whatever movie we release is actually going to be one that people want. Solo was not a movie anybody really wanted. They just thought Han Solo, Chewie, the Falcon, those are bankable things, right? Supposedly. Apparently it didn't work out that well, but I think that's kind of what they're looking for. Now, Mendelsohn does get kind of a dig in at the people who are boycotting, the fans who are boycotting Star Wars. So let me go down here and find the vocal minority. Here we go. The vocal minority skewed the narrative of the well-reviewed and mostly well-received The Last Jedi so that its $1.33 billion gross was viewed as a failure, and that didn't help. Nor did the online narrative around Rian Johnson's sequel being that disappointed fans by being too different / bold / unconventional or too politically correct. That was frustrating both to those who really liked The Last Jedi and to those who didn't like it for subjectively valid reasons entirely unrelated to the gender parity and racial makeup of its cast. Yeah, personally, I hated The Last Jedi because they destroyed Luke Skywalker forever. And I can't watch that movie because I know how Luke's story ends, and it's a downer. So now what should have been either a victory lap after 3 straight $1 billion plus grossers or an acceptable mulligan is going to only add to the EGAD Star Wars is doomed drumbeat. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I do believe that the fan boycott did play into this somewhat. I don't think that the vocal... I hate to use the term hater, but the people who are very upset with The Last Jedi, which I count myself in that group, by the way. I really hate The Last Jedi. The people calling for the boycotts, I think that they did some damage. I don't think that they would do the kind of damage that is being done to this movie. The movie was supposed to open at $150 to $170 million, and we're looking at it barely eking over 100 million. So that tells me that the general public probably just weren't feeling it either. And a lot of reasons for that, I think, is, yeah, it was too soon after the last Star Wars movie, and the marketing was terrible. Like, they didn't even start promoting Solo until like 2 months ago, and they really dropped the ball on this. There was no buzz for it. People weren't excited about it. Some people, I'm wondering if they even knew there was another Star Wars movie coming out. The toys are not available because the shelves are still cluttered with Last Jedi stuff. It just, there were a lot of balls dropped, I think, with Solo. And, clearly, again, Disney is going to take a look at this and be like, okay, so apparently fans don't want old school style Star Wars movies featuring original trilogy characters. They don't want the Falcon. They don't want Chewie. They don't want these things, because if they did, they would have come out to support it. So again, like Geeky Sparkles and I were talking, this might actually have the opposite effect on Star Wars going forward than what fans had hoped for, which is Disney will get it together and make better Star Wars movies that will please fans. Solo actually had, I know a lot of people boycotted it, but there actually was a lot of fan service in Solo, and Disney might just be like, you know what? Let the past die. Let's just move on and create this new Star Wars narrative, and don't even worry about what the fans think, because if they really liked it, they would have supported it. That's kind of what we're afraid is going to happen, that they're actually going to go further the other way and give us more movies like The Last Jedi. Hopefully that's not the case, but I don't have any hope for Episode 9. And we're pretty much just writing off the sequel trilogy as just a complete waste. So far, I mean, both of us have liked the Star Wars stories, but I don't know where they're going to go from here. They did talk about a Boba Fett movie. I think this is definitely going to affect Boba Fett. I mean, if you can't sell a Han Solo movie, you're not going to be able to sell a Boba Fett movie. I mean, I would not be surprised if they canceled Boba Fett after this. Now, this is a good point, and this is another one we want to bring up for the people who are calling for Kathleen Kennedy's head. I don't think this is going to happen. Disney is drowning in MCU money and is about to get more from Pixar. This is true. The Incredibles 2 is going to make a lot of money. If a bunch of huge franchises can't compensate for an occasional foul ball, what's the point of having a bunch of big franchises? Star Wars Episode 9 will still be big, and at worst, Lucasfilm can release one big Star Wars movie every 2 to 3 years. When lifelong Star Wars fans ruefully admit that they just aren't psyched to see the newest Star Wars movie, especially one that costs as much as $300 million, thanks to reshoots, Shades of Justice League, maybe these young original trilogy character prequels aren't the way to go. They never were, but now we might, pending post-debut legs, have proof. Yeah, again, I am going to agree with Scott Mendelsohn here. Disney can afford to take a loss on one movie. I personally think they didn't put as much money into marketing Solo because they had pretty much written it off as a bomb 6 months ago. There were articles out there 6 months ago that Disney's like, yeah, we know this movie's not going to do that well, but we're going to put it out there anyway because we already spent a bunch of money on it. But yeah, Disney can absorb the loss of Solo. This isn't now... How Episode 9 does, I think, is definitely going to decide the future of Star Wars. Galaxy's Edge, remember, Disney makes a ton of money off of parks and resorts. Like Galaxy's Edge, you could stop making Star Wars movies tomorrow and sell tickets to Disney World and upsell people on Galaxy's Edge, and they're going to make a ton of money. I mean, they just are. So Disney's not going to cry too much over this movie. I don't think this is going to cost Kathleen Kennedy her job or anything. I think they had already written Solo off months ago, and I think that shows in the marketing and the fact they weren't pushing it as hard as they did The Last Jedi. Again, that's just a personal opinion. Again, I think if you're looking for changes at Lucasfilm, those changes would probably take place after Episode 9. If Episode 9 is a disaster, because right now Disney can just say, oh, these Star Wars stories don't perform as well as the main series. If Episode 9 is a disaster, then yeah, I think you're definitely going to see a change in leadership at Lucasfilm. But Solo bombing at the box office this weekend, I do not believe you're going to see that change if that's what you're hoping for, which I know a lot of fans are. I think they have a plan for the next couple of years and they're going to stick to it. And then after that, they might sit down and reevaluate, how they're handling Star Wars. but they've already made their money back on this thing. I mean, it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in hearing your feedback. Have you seen Solo? Did you boycott Solo? Have you heard good things, bad things? I know some people, it's been very mixed. I mean, I've talked to other Star Wars fans who were pleasantly surprised that the movie didn't suck. And there were other people who were like, no, it's actually the worst of the movies because the guy is clearly not Harrison Ford. We had an initial reaction that we recorded in the car back from the theater, which was enthusiastic, and I actually stand by that. I think the movie, as a movie, as an old school Star Wars fan, I think it's actually pretty decent, but I completely understand why people are feeling the way they are toward the franchise at this point. The only reason we went was actually to be able to review the movie. I work for a blog and I had to review it. So, but seriously, it was like on my list of chores that day. I was like, okay, I got to mow the lawn and then we got to go see Solo. Was not looking forward to it. The theater we were in was very, very empty. There were maybe 25 people in the theater. That same theater was completely full for Avengers Infinity War and The Last Jedi. Now, we are in a college town, so, you know, there were a lot of kids that were out of school. So that will explain some of the emptiness, but I think there were about the same amount of people at the Solo preview night as there was for Coco. Okay, so I mean, you know, take it as you will, and I think it's gonna probably make about as much money as Coco did. But yeah, so that's where Solo is, and after this we have a year and a half where you know, Disney can maybe regroup and hopefully, I mean, I'm hoping Episode 9 is going to be good. I hope that they can come back. I mean, I preferred The Force Awakens to The Last Jedi, but The Force Awakens didn't wow me either, and I'm pretty much at this point, like, I've written the sequel trilogy off as a complete bust for me as a Star Wars fan. I haven't really cared for either movie in the sequel trilogy, but both Geeky Sparkles and I really did like Rogue One and Solo. I just don't see them doing a whole lot more of these prequel type movies after this. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Comment below, subscribe to the channel for pop culture news and views, as well as gaming videos, art videos, and whatever we feel like talking about that day. We're not really a ranty channel. We're trying not to be a ranty channel, but there's a lot going on in pop culture, and there definitely is a pop culture war going on. And it's really interesting to watch and see how both sides try to spin it. So this has been Neon for Clownfish TV. I will talk to you later.